And a couple questions for you first. How many are board members? All right. I've also been on a board. How many of you have difficult people in your association?
I'm surprised there's not more hands.
Yeah, I thought everyone would raise their hands. I was talking with one of my board members earlier today, and we were talking, and they said, so-and-so moved out. I said, so things calmed down? They said, well, no, someone else moved in to take that person's place. So one of the facts of life that we see is that, people can be difficult. I can be difficult. I'm sure you can be difficult. We all have mood swings. We all have days that are good and bad. But one of the things that we have to deal with is people that don't agree with us, the people that have different agendas. And one of the things that I also want to point out is, why do people choose to live in a condo or co-op? I'm sorry, what did you say?
Because they can afford it.
They can afford it. Why else do you think people do that? Yes?
They're tired of cleaning gutters.
Yes. Taking care of their own home. Right. It's nice. What we've seen is people often fall in love with their condos. They walk into it, it's got granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, and they fall in love with the concept of carefree living. But unfortunately, that's not true. What we see is that for most of it, our condos or co-ops are our homes, but they come with certain sets of responsibilities. It's a shared property with rules and regulations. Everyone has rights. And you could say, I go to sleep at 8 o'clock, but the person next door says, I come home at 10 o'clock and I want to have a party. And the whole concept is, how do we get along with each other? And what we see is procedures that people say that's for other people, rules. It's like, does everyone remember Leona Helmsley? Rules are for other people or for the little people. Little people pay taxes, I don't need to. But unfortunately, in co-ops and condos, we all theoretically have to get along. So the idea is that we need to set up procedures that will work, and when they don't work, then you have to have procedures in place for that. We also have priorities, and if you look at the handout, there's an article that I wrote a few years ago about Band-Aids on buildings. People have both short and long-term goals. Some people move into a condo or co-op and say, I'm only going to be here for 2 years, so I don't really care about the maintenance of the property. And for other people say, this is my home, I'm going to live here for 20 years or plus. They're going to carry me out of here. And they want to invest in something that they feel will both represent their lifestyle and also be a good long-term investment for them. Managing these buildings, as we do for many buildings in Chicago and Evanston, is always a problem because we're dealing with people who have very different agendas and lifestyles and relatively different ways of looking at the world, both financially and otherwise. And what we've also learned is some people really should not live in condos and co-ops. Unfortunately, over the years, I've had discussions with people and said, perhaps it's best that you don't live in this building. They have unexpected or unrealistic expectations of what it means to live in a condo. Their worldview is all about them. They hear things that no one in the world can hear, and they want the association to take care of it. And they want someone else to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to deal with their specific needs, which is just financially impossible for most associations to deal with. What I advise boards is to look for the best in everyone and expect that a few will lie, cheat, and act only in their own self-interest. But on the other hand, to have enough protections in place that you and your association are protected. Okay. Do you want to jump in on that? Rob, I know you deal with it from the other side also.
Well, yeah, I think what you always have to, and again, as Jim said, my name's Rob Kogan with Kovach, Schiffer, Nesbitt. We're attorneys that focus our practice in the representation of community associations. Just out of curiosity, how many here are from condos? How many from common interest communities, single homeowners associations, townhomes? Very few. Okay, so largely a downtown crowd, I take it, correct? Okay. So, just to, I'm sorry? Oh, co-ops.
Yeah, how many co-ops? There's a few.
Okay.
Great.
Two. All right. So then I will not talk about common interest communities, but we will talk about co-ops. How about that? I think there was one person, so I'll just mention it. But as Jim said, you're living in an association and you want carefree maintenance, but you also have to remember it's kind of communal living because you're all living very close to each other. And when you're dealing with people's homes, people get emotional. So you always have to keep that in the back of their mind. You know, you have people that might be moving into your association that came from a single family home with an acre lot and they didn't have a neighbor for a mile. You have other people that never lived in a single family home and have always lived in a condominium or development and understand what to expect. So when you're on a board of directors, you always need to keep that in the back of your head, that this is somebody's home. This is one of their largest investments. It's where they come after a hard day's work or whatever it may be. And they, you know, some people just want to relax. Others, as Jim said, want to have parties, whatever it may be. There's all types of different perspectives on what that living environment should be. And when you get on a board of directors, you have to try and keep all perspectives in mind when you're trying to govern the association. But at the end of the day, you need to do what's in the best interest of the association, whether even if that isn't in the best interest of yourself as a board member or in the best interest of your neighbor or your friend or whatever it may be. You're elected on the board to make the ultimate decision for the association looking 100 years ahead. What's going to be in the best interest? Jim mentioned reserve accounts are people's differing philosophies about whether they want to pay a large special assessment and get things fixed right now, or whether they want to pay a gradual increase in assessments, fund a large reserve account because they're there for the long run. But as a board member, you need to make that decision as to what's in the best interest of the association. And if you do that, most, I'm not going to say all, but most people, and we'll talk about how better to communicate, et cetera, later on, but most people in the association will understand that you've made the right decision and for the best interest of the association moving forward.
You know, I'm going to jump to board and board members, and there's an article I wrote a few years ago. It's the first one, Management Focus, Managing Board Conflicts. You know, it's not just that boards and residents sometimes don't agree. It's often boards don't agree within themselves. So what we've learned is that, you know, board rules votes, you're never going to have, or rarely will you have 100% of the board agreeing, but when the vote is done, then you move on. And it's the same thing with unit owners. If they don't like the way the board is voting on something, they could run and get on the board and see how much work it is to be on the board. And I've been on both boards, and I've been board president of associations, so I know what it is from your side also. One of the things that we've learned about, and Rob has mentioned this too, is communication. We've learned to over-communicate with residents and with board people. Even then, they're still going to say, you never told me. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to meetings and they say, well, no one ever told me this. They don't go to board meetings, they don't read newsletters, they don't read minutes from meetings, but it's still our fault because we didn't tell them what's going on in the association. So again, over-communicate whenever you can. Boards should set goals and follow meeting agendas. You got to control your meeting and not let the terrorists take over. And, you know, and I've said to board members is if the meeting gets out of control, you stop the meeting. And again, you control who speaks and how long they can speak. And again, that's another rule that we've seen very successful. You don't want someone to hijack your meeting, including fellow board members. Boards should not let things get personal. If things get personal, again, you just bring it back to the facts. Don't let people get hostile. The board president should be in control of the meeting and control the agenda. So if things go out on a tangent that is, you just say we need to bring it back and focus on the facts of what you're discussing. Consulting an attorney. Many associations don't want to spend money to talk to their attorney, and I think that's wasted breath. It's not appropriate. We're all volunteers when you're on a board. You're not expected to know the law. The laws change constantly. You cannot be expected to know what's current and how to handle every project. I can only advise you is consult with your attorney and get an opinion letter. We find this very beneficial. We'll call the association's attorney and say, this is the issue. We want something from you, and we want something in writing that then we can base these facts on moving forward. So again, spend a little bit of money, get an opinion letter on an issue, and then you could point back to it. Someone mentioned to me about Palm 2 and the changes that took an effect on running board meetings. I think most of you are probably aware of the Palm 2 decisions a few years ago. And looking at that case from one of the things that we've realized is the board at the time was making decisions, and when questioned in court, they said, did you get an opinion letter from your attorney? And they said no. If they had an opinion letter from their attorney backing up some of their decisions, it is my belief, and talking to a number of attorneys, the decisions probably would have gone a different direction. But again, the board was acting without legal advice and making decisions on things that was probably beyond what they should have been making. So again, I can't advise you enough to get opinion letters on things. And the last one on this, and I'll turn it over to Rob, is don't hire friends and relatives. Sure, Rob.
Well, okay, so I just want, and I'll answer your question in 1 sec. I just want to reiterate what Jim said. I can, as an attorney, and it's kind of a shameless plug, obviously rely on us. You know, we got to eat. I got kids. But I just want to reiterate what he said. The Palm case, the Palm 2 case, would have had a different result if the board had had written opinions. And what a written opinion is, it could be an email now. Nowadays, it's easy. You send a lawyer an email, lawyer sends you back a quick email. That's basically a written opinion. Now you have what that lawyer told you in writing. Illinois law has, the state of Illinois has great law with regard to breach of fiduciary duty claims and board members. As long as a board relies on the opinion of counsel, that board cannot breach its fiduciary duty to the association or the members.
This is a very important issue, and I strongly recommend you write this down. Maybe repeat it, Rob.
Okay, so as you're all aware, if you're on the board, you know you're a fiduciary. And a fiduciary is basically the highest, I'm sorry? Yeah, the highest trust placed on someone. Because you're essentially elected by the owners, and then you are handling their money. You're making decisions with regard to their property. You have the highest amount of trust, thank you, that is bestowed upon by anyone under Illinois law. And what the courts have held is that if you call your lawyer and you say, is the sky blue? And I write you a letter and I say, no, it's purple. And you then go around and tell all the owners that it's purple, and because the sky's purple, you invest in offshore oil wells or something like that because I said it was okay, you cannot be held liable for breach of fiduciary duty. It's bulletproof. So the more you rely on your lawyer, or the more you rely on any expert for that being, you may have a leak in a roof, and you go out and hire a roofing expert, and the roofing expert says that roof is fine, nothing wrong, it was a complete fluke. And if you have that in writing from your roofing expert and it leaks again the next day and an owner files a lawsuit, you can rely on that expert's advice on the reason why you did not get the roof replaced. Same thing with a manager, etc. You need to rely on advice of the professionals. And another thing, when we're talking about difficult owners, when you get a letter from a lawyer, for example, and it doesn't say what that owner wants it to say, and it says that the board should make a certain decision in a certain way, it's very simple for a board member to say, look, I'm just relying on legal counsel, blame the lawyer. I mean, everybody hates lawyers anyway, so, you know, feel free to just blame us, because that's what they're there for. Blame your experts. You're volunteers. You live in the association, well, at least most of you, unless you're renting your unit out. You live with the other owners. They're your neighbors. You have to see them on a day-to-day basis. So feel free to blame others. That's really the board's job, is to go out, hire experts, rely on those experts, and if those decisions don't pan out, then blame the experts. Okay?
I agree. And, you know, one of the things we see is sometimes board presidents or boards will get an opinion letter they don't agree with. And so what they'll say is, we want to get another lawyer, or we want to talk to other lawyers. And unfortunately, that is often true. We'll see board or board presidents go out and shop attorneys till they could find an attorney that'll agree with them. I think that's pretty silly. I don't think that's good use of the association's time and money. But again, we do see cases like that. Mm-hmm. Again, my advice on this is find consultants you trust, you believe in, that will protect you, and then work with them. You really need a team running your building. As volunteers, no one has the time to know everything and do everything. You need a lawyer, you need your accountant, you need your management company, you need roofing consultants. Everyone you need is part of the team that helps you make decisions. Mm-hmm. So again, you know, we get opinion letters from the auditors, we get opinion letters from various consultants. Again, it's dealing with facts. Because a lot of time what we're seeing with difficult people is they make up things. Or they're just saying, I saw this. And we'll say, show me. What are you basing this on? And they'll say, well, I think so, or I feel this is that. And again, we want to deal with facts. And I know in this time where we're dealing with alternative facts and, you know, data, and there's a lot of things that everyone's questioning everyone, is you got to have something that you base your decisions on. And really dealing with that is, again, know the laws. You know, in Illinois, there's a hierarchy of laws. There's the Illinois Condominium Act, which changes every year. There's the Chicago Condo Ordinance, which most people don't know about. The government, it has some effect in Chicago. You've got your association's declarations and bylaws, and then below that, you've got your rules and regulations, We have some associations that have adopted Robert's rules to run meetings because they want to have some order on running their associations. You also have to know the rules for various things like employees. If you have union employees, you should know the union contract because chances are your union employee knows the union rules better than you do. Again, you might need your management company or your attorney because you can't abuse your union employees. You can't abuse any employee. They have rights and privileges too.
And when we're talking about governing documents, all board members, it's incumbent upon all board members to know exactly what governs your association. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have gone to a meeting which is contentious. And the only reason it's contentious is because either the board or the owners do not know what documents are governing the association at that time. For instance, and this is now probably 15, 16 years ago, and periodically I still see this, you go to a meeting and the association's declaration, it's a condominium, the association's declaration says that a board cannot adopt a special assessment unless it's approved by 2/3 of the unit owners, regardless of what the special assessment is for. So the roof could be leaking like a sieve and the board can't go fix it because they can't get a vote of 2/3 of the owners. And you come to the meeting and I talk to the board beforehand and I say, look, that section in your declaration is obsolete. It's been superseded by amendments to the Illinois Condominium Property Act, which is the supreme document when we're talking about condominium associations. And the board has the right to go ahead and adopt a special assessment in any amount. If it's greater than 15%, owners might have the chance to file a petition, but that's the subject for another seminar. But the board can just go ahead and adopt it. And you will get owners that will be screaming and yelling because they're citing the section of the declaration which is no longer applicable. And with good communication and potential changes to that declaration, if the association had done an amended and restated declaration and changed it to comply with the law, or had communicated the board's ability to do this prior to the meeting, that meeting that turned out to be contentious didn't necessarily need to be contentious because the owners would have had the information up front and they could have investigated it on their own. I mean, look, I can come to a meeting and say X, Y, and Z, but if an owner doesn't agree with what I say, you know, sometimes I can leave it as simple as we're going to have to agree to disagree, but other times it becomes a heated argument. And that heated argument might not have had to happen if that owner had time to contact his or her own attorney and discuss the real law surrounding it. But you got to remember when you're dealing with condominium associations, the Condominium Act is supreme. So whatever in the Condominium Act is going to apply to your association regardless of the number of units or your budget amount. Someone here said they were in a homeowners association. Generally, the Common Interest Community Act, which was developed in 2010, is going to apply to homeowners and townhome associations. The Condominium Act only applies to condominiums in Illinois. Co-ops, there really isn't anything. You have the Not-for-Profit or For-Profit Corporation Act, depending on if you're a for-profit or not-for-profit cooperative. Believe it or not, there are a few for-profits. But then you just have your governing documents as with all associations. So if you're on the board of directors of a condo, you need to know your declaration of condominium ownership. You need to know what's in there. It's very important. And it never hurts to bring the lawyer out, sit down with them once a year and have a meeting and run through the documents, or bring your manager out. And, you know, so they can point out certain things. Most documents are pretty boilerplate, but there's a lot of nuances in each one. Not every association is the same and one size doesn't always fit all. So you really need to be cognizant of those. Jim mentioned Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is a guide to running a meeting. I think it's back to like the 2000, the 1500s, or some crazy time back then. I don't even know if people spoke back then. They might have just used hieroglyphics, but they had Robert's Rules of Order. So that is a document for governing meetings. When you have a board meeting, the most important thing in my business, in my opinion, you can do is conduct your board business as a board without taking any questions and comments from the owners at that time. Get through with your business first. Have questions and comments either at the beginning and then cut it off and do your business, or have it at the end. And explain that to the owners ahead of time. As Jim said earlier, a lot of owners don't show up to the meetings. So if somebody comes for the first time, they may not understand the protocol and practice conducted at the meeting. So please explain that ahead and just say, look, ladies and gentlemen, if we take questions and comments throughout the whole meeting, we're going to be here for 6 hours. And you know what? When the 6 hours is over, we're going to figure out we haven't gotten through half the agenda and haven't accomplished a thing. So make sure you explain that. All right? Some meetings you may not want to take questions and comments. In the Condo Act, you don't have to. I don't necessarily recommend that. That breeds more contentiousness. You have to also, even though you're conducting your business, you still want the owners to feel like and understand that it is their association as well. Okay? So please always keep that in mind. Associations governed by contracts. Jim talked about union contracts. I've seen a lot of associations that get in trouble with unions. So be very careful. The laws are stacked way against the association and heavily toward the union and the union employee. So if you do have a union employee issue, talk to your management company, talk to the lawyer. Okay?
I want to reiterate, just because you don't like someone and they're a union employee, it's very difficult unless you do follow, write-ups and procedures and you follow and work with the union. It's very hard to get rid of someone unless they've done something, wrong. One of the things that we've learned at buildings is on rules and regulations. Rules and regulations, the board votes on that. That's the lowest level. And what I've seen is some boards want to turn their building into almost a prison, and some buildings are loosey-goosey until there's a problem. And what we've typically found is a good sort of middle ground is to have as few rules as possible, but then enforce them uniformly and fairly with all owners. So you can't say, I like Shirley, so I'm not going to enforce the rule, but if Bob does this, I'm going to fine him, $1,000. Again, a good thing to do is look at your rules and regulations and make them something that you think is fair for everyone. And then if a problem comes up and you need to address it, the board can vote to change it. There's a procedure of notification of unit owners. You've got to publish it, send it out to everyone. But that's the easiest thing to do to fix things. It's also the weakest way if you have to go to court. Because if you really want something stronger, you've got to change your decks and bylaws. One of the other things that the board should be doing as much as possible is be transparent in all of your operations. There's changes coming through in the Illinois Economy Act for 2018. We're not really going to talk about that today, but the transparency issue has always been a big issue, and that's actually being increased in terms of what is accessible and available to unit owners. If you don't have the new regulations, I'd say talk to your management company and attorney about the changes and what that's going to mean for running your association.
One thing real quick that I wanted to say about the changes to the act and what we're seeing is we're seeing a shift towards owners' rights rather than board and association rights. So what we've noticed is you might have one or two unit owners out there who get the ear of their legislator, and they get them to change the law to basically benefit themselves. And what happens is that law is extremely adverse to the association and makes it much more difficult to govern the association. Okay, and I know we're not really here to talk about that today, but for instance, there's a law now which is going to take place in 2018 where we have to provide all owners emails to owners upon request. What that's going to do now is that's going to give we'll call them, I don't really want to call them troublemakers, disgruntled homers, whatever I can call them that, okay, as long as you say it's okay. That'll then give them the ability to go out and start sending mass emails to owners in the buildings.
And phone numbers too.
And phone numbers too. So we're seeing a shift on that, and I think one of the problems is you get maybe, and I don't even want to say runaway boards, but a board is being portrayed as being dictators. And basically what you have is an owner who's not in line and doesn't like what the board's doing and runs out and makes it seem like this board is so bad when the board's actually just trying to govern the association. And they get the ear of the media, they get the ear of the legislature, and then the legislature comes in and adopts these laws. Now, we'll have to see if any of them change, but as of right now, that's one that we're going to have to begin dealing with as of January 1st. Yeah.
So I want to thank everyone for coming. Rob Kovitz has a booth here. We've got a booth here.